Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. This is the day before Thanksgiving. And I want to remind you, I will be off tomorrow. There will be no podcast tomorrow in celebration of a splendid day. And so today I wanted to focus completely on a very serious issue. And that is the decision by the Pentagon to investigate Senator Mark Kelly over a video which we have talked about. Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, is a genuine American hero. Fought a fighter pilot battle in war, went to the far reaches of space 4 times as commander of those activities taking us into outer space. He is a genuine American hero. His wife, Gabby Giffords, a former member of Congress, you will recall was shot and wounded when political violence overtook her and the nation. I want to speak today about the campaign against Mark Kelly. As all of you know, he participated in a video which was made involving 6 Democrats who serve in the Congress, the Senate, and the House, who reminded Americans that they have the right, if they serve in battle, that troops, especially uniformed commanders, do not have the obligation to carry out orders that they believe are illegal. Just remember, that's part of the military code of justice. And all that the 6 members of Congress did was to remind the American people that, in fact, you have the right to disobey an order that is illegal. And I would remind you that on this, the 80th anniversary of the beginning of the Nuremberg trials against the top German leadership that survived the collapse of Nazi Germany, that trial in Nuremberg established the whole point that you had to use individual conscience. It was just that simple. Now, what is extraordinary, and the reason I've chosen on this podcast, the day before Thanksgiving, to comment on it, is extraordinary for the Pentagon, which until this president's term was supposed to be non-political. We now have a Pentagon that is issuing statements and a Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who are determined to carry out the president's political agenda. It is extraordinary. Extraordinary. We've never seen anything like it. And do you understand that we now have a president and a Secretary of Defense, please note a Secretary of Defense, not a Secretary of War, who are attacking sitting members of Congress and are charging them with sedition? It comes, frankly, because Donald Trump insisted that they be punished. And in fact, he went so far as to suggest that because of seditious activity, they should be punished by death. There is no doubt that the president made these statements. Now, it's true that he somewhat retracted a little bit, but the danger is that he said it at all. The Pentagon suggested that Kelly's statements in the video interfere with, and I quote, loyalty, morale, good order, and discipline of the armed forces. Why? Because it suggested that sedition was committed. The Pentagon went on to say, a thorough review of these allegations has been initiated to determine further actions, which may include recall to active duty for court-martial proceedings or administrative measures. Let me explain to you, these are threats being made by the Pentagon. And let me point out to you that troops, especially uniformed commanders, do have specific obligations to reject orders that are unlawful if they make that determination. And the question now, which is before all of us on this day before Thanksgiving, is the future of our republic. Let me remind you that Senator Kelly was a fighter pilot before becoming an astronaut and then retiring with the rank of captain. And his words were these. He told troops, "You can refuse illegal orders." Pure and simple. And he's right. There was nothing seditious about what he said. But to see the President of the United States using the Pentagon and the FBI for political retribution is appalling. Let me make it clear that we are now told that the FBI wants to interview these 6 members of Congress. Now, the Congress members don't have to agree to be interviewed by the FBI. But what is the FBI doing? Well, they're doing the bidding of the President of the United States. And this is something unconscionable. Senator Kelly said he upheld his oath to the Constitution and dismissed the Pentagon investigation as the work of bullies. And I want to quote him directly. If there is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. You know, I couldn't help but remember 1966. Richard Nixon was out campaigning for Republicans across the nation before the midterm elections. And in the last moments of the campaign, President Lyndon Johnson accused Richard Nixon of being a chronic campaigner. The remark was intended to diminish Richard Nixon. It had the opposite effect. Nixon, who had been defeated for president in 1960, defeated for governor of California in 1962, was selected by the Republican Party to articulate their pre-election message to the American people on a national broadcast. And Nixon, who many thought was going nowhere, emerged as the leader of the Republican Party, not only because he had campaigned vigorously for Republican candidates for the House and Senate and the governorships, but also because Lyndon Johnson, the President of the United States, singled him out for criticism. Donald Trump has singled out Senator Kelly. That's right. And may have elevated Mark Kelly as a result into the forefront of the potential candidates for the Democratic nomination for president in 2026. When a president of the United States speaks, people listen. And when a president of the United States weaponizes the political parts of his government, that's one thing. But when he weaponizes the Pentagon and the FBI, that's quite another thing. Let me remind you that the FBI, since the days of J. Edgar Hoover, has supposed to be non-political. That the structure of the FBI, including the nomination and appointment of the director, was designed just for that purpose, to be non-political. We saw Richard Nixon try to interfere with the FBI and the CIA, which resulted in a cover-up, which resulted in his resignation as President of the United States. And there was a determination after Watergate and after J. Edgar Hoover that the FBI should be non-political. Kash Patel is the most unqualified and the most political person ever put in charge of the FBI. And indeed, the White House was asked yesterday whether or not Kash Patel would remain as director of the FBI. And the press secretary to the president said, oh, yes, oh, yes. The president has confidence in Kash Patel. The weaponization of the Pentagon, the weaponization of the FBI, the determination to go after sitting members of Congress, 6 of them, who have the absolute right and indeed the obligation to speak out on issues, is unprecedented in the history of the American Republic. I want you to understand that Senator Kelly said, if this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding the administration accountable, it won't work. Thank God he has courage. But the question I have to ask is, how is it possible that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Speaker Johnson, could defend what the president is doing? How is it that Congress is not initiating an investigation into the politicization of the FBI and the Pentagon? And what in the world can we say about Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of Defense? And this is what Hegseth said. The Secretary of Defense, not Secretary of War. I won't call him Secretary of War. There is a Department of Defense, not a Department of War. This is what Pete Hegseth said. Kelly's conduct brings discredit upon the armed forces and will be addressed appropriately. He added that could be a court-martial, or it could be disciplinary action, perhaps a reduction in Senator Kelly's pension for his years of service. This is astounding. When you have an administration using this kind of political action in what should be a non-political setting, well, the chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell, said last week that, and I quote, our military follows orders and our civilians give legal orders. But occasionally, we know that illegal orders are given. And we know under the military code of justice that troops, especially uniformed commanders, do have specific obligations to reject orders that are unlawful if they make that determination. That is what conscience is all about. So I have decided today, on the eve of Thanksgiving, to point out to you, to all of us, the danger to American democracy. Yes, I believe strongly that what is happening now is an assault on American democracy. It is an assault by the President of the United States. It is an assault by the Secretary of Defense. It is an assault by the Director of the FBI. And on this eve of Thanksgiving, we all have an obligation to remember what it is we are thankful for. We live in the greatest, freest nation in the history of the world. And we have an obligation to defend, protect this democracy. And a president of the United States who takes an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, well, let me explain something to you. When a president violates that oath, when he exceeds his presidential authority, when he commits these kinds of horrific actions that offend the sensibility of all who believe in democracy, there needs to be an accountability. We cannot accept the abnormal positions taken by Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel, and others. This administration is committing what I think are crimes against American democracy. And I say this fully cognizant of the fact that these are statements which some of you will disagree with. But I want you to understand with all my heart, I believe that what I have said is true. And this, my friends, is what I will be reflecting on Thanksgiving, and how we can respond, and we must respond with vigor to oppose what this administration is doing. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, click any of the links to show notes to connect with me on social media, and, of course, you can email me directly. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. Remember, I'm taking tomorrow off, which means Go-Go Zoger is taking tomorrow off to celebrate Thanksgiving. By the way, this show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on advertising support. This will help us create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman. You will hear at the beginning and at the end of this podcast commercials. We want you to know our goal is to make this podcast better and to reach out to many more people. So thanks to our advertisers. And I want to say a special thank you to Go-Go Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program. Have a great day off tomorrow, Go-Go. I'll be back on Friday with you and with all of our listeners, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you on Friday.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.